Hi, and welcome to Data Platform Summit 2021. My name is Wolfgang, and I would like to welcome you to my session about data governance and cataloging with Azure Purview. I'm talking about data today. Data is everywhere. When dealing with data in a company, you've got data stored in ERP systems. You've got data stored in databases. You've got data stored in files. Maybe you've got a data lake somewhere. And if you look into your data landscape in your company, well, there's data everywhere. So data is everywhere, and sometimes it's not that easy to get the real overview about your data estate in your company. And sometimes it really seems like there's data behind every door you open. There's data stored everywhere, and some people know where the data is stored in your company, and some people, well, they maybe know where the data is stored, so it's not that easy to really get an overview about your data. And sometimes, well, we need classes. We need special classes. We need superpower classes to find the data we need to work with, to find the data we maybe have to delete because of some regulatory dependencies like GDPR requirements, like customer data that needs to be stored, and so on and so forth. So wouldn't it be nice to have a tool to find and search within our data? Because data islands, it looks like they are everywhere. Maybe we've got a data island or you've got a data island in your company with ERP data. Maybe you've got some databases somewhere to store customers' data. Maybe you've got an additional web shop somewhere. Maybe you've got a data lake somewhere. Maybe you've got some IoT data. Maybe you've got some Excel files stored somewhere on a file server. Maybe you've got some Power BI reporting. And there are many, many data islands, many, many data silos that are there in your company. And it's not the best solution to just have those data islands without to know what is stored where and without getting in touch with those data islands. To bridge the data between those data islands, to build some bridges, to know where to drive, where to search the data in order to be successful. Because data is important. Data is very important in your company. And without a good overview about your data landscape, well, the best company can't be the best company. So you really need to think about the connections. So is it a connection like that one? So really solid connection, you know how to drive, you know how to access the data. Or is it some sort of loose coupling between those data islands? There should be some data transfer from data island 1 to data island 2, from system 1 to system 2. But it's not that clear what actually happens in the background there. And wouldn't it be nice to generate some sort of map of your data landscape in your company? A data map. Wouldn't it be nice to get a map to get those data islands, those data continents cataloged and named and classified and so on and so forth. So what I really like about the tool I'm going to talk about in the next 55 minutes, Azure Purview, is that there is one central concept, which is called a data map. And that is a thing we can use to get more knowledge about the data in our data landscape in our company. So cataloging the data, building some sort of data map, that would be, I think, a good fit to start. And with that, those superpower glasses to get to know our data pieces in our company, well, We've got some sort of Azure Purview filtering based on it that we can get better and get a better understanding. But sometimes, well, it's not that easy because data is there. We identified some pieces of data, but it's not somehow sorted. It's not really easy to find a book about English language somewhere. Maybe it's here, maybe it's there, or and so on. So what we need is a system. What we need is some sort of index. What we need is some sort of searchability for our data catalog. So it's not that easy. Just put the data somewhere, catalog the data, and store it, I don't know in which structure. So we need some sort of index to search. We need some sort of maybe additional properties to identify and classify different pieces. In that picture, those are books, but in our landscape, we've got databases, tables, we've got files in a data lake, we've got entities in some sort of system. So it's really important to classify and index and sort and structure the data. And that is one of the pieces Azure Purview can help. And now, well, it's time for Azure Purview. I already mentioned my name. I'm Wolfgang. I'm working in Austria as a data consultant. I'm working in the Microsoft universe. I'm a Microsoft Data Platform MVP, and what I really like is I'm a community guy. I like to talk about data. I like to write about data. I've got my own blog. I've got my own blog series about Azure Purview. I also started adding some videos in there. So if you are interested, have a look at my blog. Ping me on Twitter, send me an email, whatever, if there are any questions. With that, it's now time for data governance. And when dealing with data governance, it's not that easy because when you talk to people about data governance, everybody tries to have a definition of data governance. And data governance is not only one thing, it's a combination of different things. Because data governance includes some sort of data classification, it includes a data catalog, it includes different tools and processes to get the knowledge of your data landscape. Data governance can include some data quality processes. There can be data lifecycle definitions. There is metadata involved. There's a business vocabulary. There's a glossary involved. Data governance also includes some sort of data strategy. So many, I don't call them buzzwords because they are really important, but there are many pieces involved in here. And yeah, data governance is really important. And today I would like to focus on the piece of data cataloging and data map. So Azure Purview in the current version is mainly focused on providing a data catalog and a data classification system and a business glossary to you, the user, in order to better understand your data landscape. So with Azure Purview, I already mentioned it. It's quite a new tool. It was introduced in December 2020. And Microsoft named it, well, a unified data governance service. So Azure Purview is a unified data governance service. And what does it mean to be named a unified data governance service? Well, it needs to support some things to get an overview about your data. And first, Azure Purview allows you to map your data. It allows you to find your data in your company. And it doesn't matter if your data is living in the cloud or the data is living on premises. So hybrid sources are supported. Data map, number one. Number two, well, data needs to be discovered and data in those data sources needs to be classified. What do I mean with talking about classification? For example, you've got a database, you've got several tables in there, and you've got a table which is named customer. What we could apply to that table is some sort of classification. Oh, that table contains customer data. And more specifically, there are columns in our table where we've got a first name, an address, we've got an email address, and so on and so forth. And we can also apply classifications to those columns, like the email address. Well, it's the stamp of getting the classification of email address. And that is the part of classification. Technical description. We've got that table in that schema, in that database, which is called customer and so on. That is one part of the story. But the classification, it's more data focused. So what is really contained in your data table? What is really contained in your column? And that is the classification. Number 3, understand your data supply chain. What is the data supply chain? In a company, we've got many different data stores. We've got databases, file storages, SharePoint, Power BI, whatever. And data, it's not only there in one part, and it's not only there in one data store, it's also stored and transferred between different data sources. And that is the data supply chain. So fetching data out of a system, maybe transforming it, and storing it to another system. That is the data supply chain or data lineage. So the lineage of your data is really important to get the real overview about your data landscape. And last but not least, number 1, 2, and 3, those were mainly focused on the technical part. So we had the database server, schema name, database name, whatever. But the business context is really important, because business users, they need to know, and they are responsible to work with the data. They are responsible to analyze the right data. And so we need to, in addition to the technical layer, provide some business context, a business glossary. For example, that customer table, well, it's not only a customer, it's also some sort of glossary term, a business partner. So technical description is one part, but in addition, we've also have to think about the business context, the business glossary. So that is, well, in short, Azure Purview, a data governance service in the cloud, in the Azure cloud, which allows you to map your data sources, which allows you to classify your data sources, which allows you to add some sort of business context in there. Sounds nice? I think it is nice. And in the next few minutes, we will dive into that Azure Purview universe, what is really in there, and well, unified data governance. And what is really needed, it's the platform, the framework, the foundation to really work. It's that part of the story. It's the unified platform in there. And the platform, it contains the data map. And the data map, we can compare it to a real map where we have those islands, where we have those cities of data that are connected, maybe connected because we are traveling from our hometown to work. And we can compare it with data coming from a source data system and is transferred to a target data system. So the data map, it contains the data assets. The data asset in the Azure Purview context can be a database table. It can be a file or a folder in a data lake. It can also be, what else? An entity in SAP. It can be a pipeline in Azure Data Factory. So many different specific expressions of the data assets, but data asset is one entity in our data landscape. And the data assets, well, they are fetched out of the source systems. I already mentioned the on-premises and cloud-based systems, but also different types of systems. We can have operational and or analytic and or software as a service systems. And those informations out of the source systems are scanned and extracted from the source systems using the integrated Purview scanners. And during that process of scanning, there is also the process of adding classifications to those assets applied. We will see many examples of classifications that can be applied. Think about the email address. Think about telephone numbers. Think about customer numbers that follow a specific structure and so on. And that is the part of filling the data map. So scanning on a technical level, data assets, fetching all those tables, columns, and so on, adding data classification based on the data that is stored in the data sources. So Purview analyzes the data and combines the technical information plus the classification. In addition, well, we need to work with the data map, with the data catalog. So the data catalog is the central piece of Azure Purview in the current version. The data catalog allows you to search for data assets. For example, you search for the term supplier, customer, article, product, whatever. And you can also search for business glossary terms, because the data catalog, that one combines the technical information, data assets, the classification, plus the business glossary, which isn't applied automatically. It's your part of work to add business glossary to that. And the data catalog, well, you can search almost every property that is stored in the data catalog and have a look at all those entities contained in your data catalog. And last but not least, it's the lineage. Well, it's the data relationship. Maybe Azure Data Factory is used to transform and transport data from A to B. Maybe Synapse pipelines is used, or maybe integration services packages are used to transform and transport data. So data lineage is also one part of the catalog. And there is also one thing that is, well, it's there, but it's, let's put it in a version 1, data insights. So you can query the data of your data catalog and analyze the content of your data catalog using the data insights of Azure Purview. As I said, well, it's there, but it's there. Just try it, and you can use it to get more out of it, how many scans, how many successful scans, and so on. And now, Azure Purview is not able to really work and focus and really, well, exist without those external sources. And if you know, maybe for example, Synapse, Azure Synapse Analytics, there is the concept of linked services. And that is the part where we can integrate Azure Purview into other systems like Synapse or Data Factory. And the other way around, where Azure Purview connects to different sources like Power BI, SQL Server on-premises, Oracle, Azure Synapse Analytics, other Azure data services to get the data metastructure, the data assets out of those systems. And all those classification and scanning is done using those Purview scanners. But there are many different services and sources out there, and there are many that are not supported, and there is no Purview integrated scanner available for them. And there is one part that is really, really nice. Azure Purview is based on the Apache Atlas API. And Apache Atlas, if you haven't heard about Apache Atlas, that is the open source data governance standard software, I would call it. And Azure Purview allows you to work with your data catalog, your data map, using the Apache Atlas API to query data of your data catalog, but also the other way around, to write and enhance your data catalog data. So if there's no direct connector, if there's no scanner for a system, you can use the Apache Atlas API to add information into your Azure data catalog. Very, very nice and handy way. And yeah, to dive a little bit deeper, I'm gonna skip that one because Azure Purview is in preview. It's still in preview, and I think we are nearing and turning into the GA train somewhere in the future, in the next few months. And there are some levels and different feature sets that are available as of today in the preview, and it's not clear what are the feature levels that will be there when Azure Purview gets GA. So there are different levels, and we can expect some feature sets, some different feature sets, like the basic data catalog, having more enhanced data cataloging functions like the lineage and the insights and security part, where the data insights maybe feature set will come in. And as I said, Azure Purview is a Azure service. It's available in the Azure portal. And there's the Azure Purview Studio, which is the one-stop shop to work with your data catalog, to configure connections to the outside, and which is the part where I'm gonna skip and switch to the demo. And let's see Azure Purview in action. What you see here, it's the Azure portal, and there is one section of Purview accounts. So it's named accounts. So you can have multiple accounts and multiple Purview accounts in your Azure subscription. Why is there the need for multiple Purview accounts? One might say because the data catalog, shouldn't it be one stop for everything in your data organization? Well, for sure, but think about, maybe you want to have some sort of dev environment, maybe you want to have some sort of test environment, maybe you want to have some sort of production environment. So I think there is the need and the requirement for having multiple Purview accounts, but in most of the cases you will start with one Purview account. And well, it's here, it's the create button to start the journey into the direction of Azure Purview. If you start creating an Azure Purview account, there's one thing you have to consider. It's the Purview account name, which needs to be unique. And not only unique in your subscription, it needs to be unique within the Azure overall naming structure. So that is one part where you have to think about the naming structure. And as it's mentioned here, licensing and cost is one thing. Azure Purview is a cloud-based service, and Microsoft provides you with the infrastructure for storing the data, for providing the data map, for providing the Azure Purview Studio. And since the middle of August, or before the middle of August this year, Azure Purview was available in 2 different levels, having 4 capacity units or 16 capacity units. We haven't known what, and haven't got the information what a capacity unit really is, but I just compared it to some sort of compute power. So before August 2021, there were 2 levels, 4 and 16, 4 or 16 capacity units. Starting with the middle of August this year, the Purview team introduced auto-scale capabilities. So now every Purview account, every Purview catalog is instantiated starting with 1 capacity unit. And 1 capacity unit includes 25 operations per second maximum and 2 GB of metadata storage. And if you are working very heavily with your data catalog, well, the Purview account is scaled. So we are working with 1 capacity unit, then we have more requests, we are scaling up, and afterwards Purview scales it down to 1 capacity unit again. So autoscale is there since August 2021. And that's almost it. Another thing which is new in the Azure portal is the managed resources. There are some technical services in the background. So there's a storage account, an event hub created, and you can name the managed resource group where all those pieces are stored. You can't change them. You can't have a look at the content of the storage account. That is just for, well, if you have some sort of naming conventions, you can name the resource group in there. And that's it. The last question you should answer is the connectivity mode. Is it available for all networks or private endpoints? And that's it. Nothing more we have to consider. As the creation takes some minutes and, well, we need data in our data catalog to analyze it, well, I'm gonna skip that creation. And I've already created one Purview account, the Purview Wolfgang Purview account. So I'm gonna switch to that one. And that is the Purview Studio. That is the main entry. That is the main user interface when dealing with Azure Purview. And in the last few months, Microsoft changed the user interface of some of those data services and data-related services to look similar. So Synapse Analytics, Data Factory gets into that way. So we've got some sort of main screen where we've got different actions we could quick start with. And if you want to learn more about Azure Purview, there is the Knowledge Center, which contains links to different videos, to blogs, to tutorials, and so on and so forth. The documentation is here. So if you are new to Purview, the Knowledge Center is the start. Another thing, well, Azure Purview needs some sort of connection to the outside. We need to configure sources. We need to configure some sort of connection information to data sources. And that is hidden and can be accessed using the Register Sources button over here. And within that Register Sources button, well, we can have a look at our data map. And we can have a look at our data sources that are registered within our Purview instance. In my demo environment, I've registered different types, like data lake storages, SQL pools in Synapse Analytics, Azure Resource Groups, Azure SQL Database Services, Power BI, and one on-premises SQL Server. So different kinds of data sources are available. And we can have a look at the data sources that are available out of the box. So Azure-based services. That one, the first one, is the Azure generic connector, where we can specify a resource group, where we can specify what are the members and what are the objects that should be analyzed within that resource group. Azure Synapse Analytics, data lake storage accounts, blob storage accounts, SQL databases, managed instance, and so on. MySQL and Postgres. So different kinds of services in the Azure cloud. Databases, as I said, it's not only the cloud, it's also available for analyzing hybrid data sources. And we can analyze and connect to Oracle. We can analyze and connect to a local SQL server, Google BigQuery, Teradata, and so on. So if I continue here, what we need to do is we need to name that data source. We need to specify the server endpoint, which actually is the server name, the IP address, the instance, whatever. And we can assign that one to a collection. And a collection is some sort of logical grouping. And that logical grouping is, before the middle of August, it was just a logical group. Before the middle of August, there was no way of having different permission sets based on your maybe collections and to have different user and permission groups within one Azure Purview account. So before the August, let's call it release wave, there was only one permission set that was available for the whole catalog. So before August, the collection was a logical collection. After the August release wave, it changed a little bit, and there was some sort of thing introduced that collections are now some sort of permission level. So what I opened here is a second browser window, because existing Purview accounts, if you already have an existing Purview account that was created before August 2021, it looks like that. It only has one permission set. Either you have the right to work with the Purview account or you don't have the right. The new part and new Purview accounts created after August 18th, well, there is an option of changing role assignments in different levels of your collection structure, because collections can be structured in a hierarchy. We can define a hierarchy of collections, and in new environments, it is optional and it is available to add some sort of different levels at different hierarchy levels. So we can add data curators, we can add data readers or collection admins at a different level of collection. So be aware that old Purview accounts currently only have one permission set, but they will be migrated to the new environment that we can add some sort of permissions in there. But now back to the sources. Register a source requires some sort of connection information. And the source itself, it's not more than the connection information. If I go to the data storage account, if I go to edit source, well, it's the name of a storage account. It's not more, it's just the name of my storage account. That's it. So nothing more included here. In order to get metadata and in order to scan the source, we need to configure a new scan configuration. And the scan, well, that is the definition and that is the process that really works with your data source, that connects to your data source, that lists the metadata, that analyzes the data that is stored there, and that adds some sort of classification in there. So for a data lake, for example, for my data lake source that is included here, I've got 3 scan definitions in here. And what you can see is that there are different scan rule sets applied. And there is some sort of built-in scan rule set. And there is a way of defining your own scan rule set. So now the question is, what is a scan rule set? And a scan rule set we can define, and let's go here. We can define a scan rule set which contains the information, what are the pieces of your environment that should be analyzed. For a data lake, we can define the list of supported file types. For example, CSV, JSON, Parquet files, ORC, gzip files. We can also add new file types in there, or we can deselect. For example, we don't want to analyze TXT files. What is also needed is what are the classification rules that should be applied during the automated scan or after the automated technical metadata scan. And the classification rules, there is one set and a huge list. I think there are 200 something system rules available. And those classification rules take the data in your data sources. They analyze the data based on different rules, for example, regular expressions, and try to apply some sort of classification steps on that data. For example, there are system classification rules dealing with license numbers, dealing with passport numbers, and you can select and deselect all those public and system prepared system rules, classification rules. In my example, I selected all those rules that are, well, somehow assigned and working with Austria. So Austria license number, passport number, social security number, and so on. And what is the magic between those classification rules? As a first step, the technical metadata is read from the source. In our case, in a data lake, the directory structure is read. The files are read. In a second step, the classification rules are applied. So what are, or the content of files is read. And there is a good documentation in the Purview documentation about how many rows are read, how many percentages of the overall data is read and used to analyze. And the classification rules are applied on your data. And if there is a classification rule that, or the data aligns to your classification rule, the classification itself is applied. So the overall scan rule set, to come back to the scan rule definition, is we are defining the content that should be analyzed plus the classification rules that should be applied during the classification process. And we can also create some sort of custom classification rules. So that is the definition of scan rule sets. And every different source system has a system-defined scan rule set, including default classification rules, including default information. So that is the system classification rules and system scan rule set and the custom scan rule set. For the classifications, well, there is the list of classifications. Like we want a classification that is an Austrian passport number. That one is provided by Microsoft, that has a formal name and so on. And there are classification rules that support us and Purview to identify Austrian passport number somewhere. And there can also be your own classifications be applied. And I created one in my environment, which is called a DBCC Kunde. Kunde is German for customer. So a classification for that one, for the Kunden classification, is based on an associated classification rule. And there is one classification rule associated which follows a data pattern. And that data pattern is based on a regular expression. So if the data content in a column of a database table, in a column of a CSV file or a Parquet file in the data lake follows that structure of KU for Kunde, customer, and afterwards 4 digits, well, the classification of Kunde should be applied. So everything is possible to use the system defined classification rules and scan rule set, plus adding some sort of custom classification rules that really work with your data. And now back to the sources. So the sources are the first step. So I compare it to the connection string in integration services. The scans are the real processes that connect to the data sources, extract the technical infrastructure and metadata, and apply all those classifications in there. And in that list, well, it's not that kind of easy, and it's not that kind of metaphor of having a data map. And there is the map view in there. And if we switch to the map view, well, we can have a look at those collections that can have sub-collections. And within that sub-collections, we can have some sources applied. So we've got data lakes in Europe, and that data lake storage account, that Purview source, is assigned to the data lake storage collection. To the data lake Europe collection. we've got a synapse collection, we've got a database collection, and we've got databases applied over here. And we've got one collection which is empty at the moment, which is called the production databases. So collections are your way of structuring and logically structuring your data landscape. Remember, all the Purview accounts only have one permission set for the whole Purview account. With the new created ones, we can apply different permissions in there. And you can have data stewards for Europe. You can have data stewards for your data lake, but they are not able to read data catalog information from Synapse databases, for example. So really, really nice to differentiate the permissions in the new and after the August update. And now, well, let's go back to the Purview account. In our data map, we've got the sources. Those sources have scans applied. And if we are running a scan, we can have a look at the scan definition, and we can have a look at the history of scan runs. And we can see if it was a full scan, if it was successful, and if it discovered some assets in there, and how long it took to run. So scans are really, really necessary to get data into your data catalog. And the data catalog itself, we can start to browse the data catalog by browsing the assets that are in there. And what Purview gives you at that level is the different types of data sources: data lake storages, data factory, SQL Server, Power BI, and so on. So we can have a look at, for example, Azure SQL databases. We can have a look at the demos database in here. And there are schemas, and in my case, it's one schema that is in that database. And we can have a look at the customers table in there. So that is one data asset. The asset I talked about that one in one of my first slides. So one data asset, it's a table in an Azure SQL database. And that table is called customers. That table belongs to a schema in a database, and that database belongs and is stored on a SQL server in Azure. So that is the hierarchy that is applied, and everything is linked together. So we can go back to the schema, we can have a look at the related, and we can go back to the customers table. So that is, everything is connected in here. And now there are properties that are extracted from the source system. There are properties that are extracted and they are really technical, like the schema of the database table, like customer code, customer ID, email, first name, and last name. So that is the technical information that is extracted. What can also be extracted, and I picked the wrong one. Let's look for that one. Let's search for a supplier, and that is the more natural way of dealing with a catalog, the more natural way to work with a database. It's to search in a database, and that is the main entry point. I just add some sort of keyword in here, and we can have a look at the list of results in here. I'm going to switch to that one, and let's see if there is some lineage involved. And yeah, data supply chain, the data lineage is there. I was looking and analyzing the supplier table, which is stored in a database server, in a schema, in a database. And that database table, well, it's related to some other parts in our data landscape. And it's connected by, in that case, it's Azure Data Factory copy activities. So that is the part where the data lineage comes into the play, where we can have a look at the lineage of the data. Where does the data come from? Where is the data going to? And everything is related. And we can also have a look at the different columns. for example, the supplier key, that one is read out of a file in a data lake. That one is going through a copy activity in an Azure SQL database table. And let's move over here. Oh my God, there's something related over here. It's an Azure Data Factory copy activity, a second one. And the supplier key, it's stored in the import supplier database on an other database. So that one is here. And what we can do, we can track the lineage. We can track the lineage column-wise. And we can also switch to the import supplier object, which is the end of the pipeline in here. And we can have a look at the schema in there. We can have a look and go back, and we can have a look and switch to the copy activity, which is also an asset in our data catalog, an asset of type Azure Data Factory copy activity. And there are different properties involved, but there is also a hierarchy. So that pipeline or that copy activity belongs to a pipeline. That pipeline is related to an Azure Data Factory instance. The properties that are read out of the source system, they are different because a database table has other properties and information compared to a copy activity. Lineage, we've already seen. And there's one thing I haven't shown you before. If you have multiple data sources, databases, data storages in your environment, there are people and there are experts that really know what is that data source about. What is the data that is stored there, and who is the technical owner, who is the business owner, and we can add and edit the information of that copy activity, for example, and add some experts. We can add the data owner. So we can edit that one, and we can select a list of users. For example, my colleague, Power BI, and he's the technical expert for that one. So, and for the owner, it's also Power BI, which we add here, and he is the business owner of that. If we save that one, the metadata that was extracted in the automated scan is enhanced by the manually curated information. So we can enhance the information that Purview extracted from the source system with our information, more information that is needed. And now let's have a look at the classification, because it would be nice to see some results of the classification. And when we search our data catalog, what we get here, it's the list of results. 22 results in here, and we can filter based on the asset type. We do not really know if the data is stored in a database, in a data lake storage, or is it somehow transferred using a data factory copy activity. But what we know is we want to have a look at data and data assets that do contain an email address and are named customer. So we've got the search, the keyword in here, and we've got the classification in here. And we just select that one, the email address. What do we get back? It's a list of 5 assets in here, having 1, 2, 3 SQL tables and 1 SQL view in here. And there is one table that is stored in a data lake, which also contains customers' data. And if we have a look here, there is some sort of schema classification applied even to a file in a data lake. So data classification is not limited to database tables only. It is also applied to files in a data lake, to whatever, to Power BI data sets. Not at the moment, but I hope that this will come in the future, that we've got also the schema classification in Power BI datasets. As I talked about the Power BI datasets, let's go over here, go back to the browse assets, and I already added a source of type Power BI. And with that Power BI source and the following scan, we get the Power BI structure, the workspaces, the data sets, the reports, the dashboards that are available in a Power BI tenant. What you can do is by default, you connect your Purview instance to the Power BI tenant of your, of the same subscription, of the same Azure Active Directory tenant. Using PowerShell, you can connect to different Power BI tenants. So it's not limited to only scan and categorize your own Power BI tenant. You can add it using the PowerShell. But now, this is the list of workspaces in my environment. I'm gonna go deeper to the list of, I can't sort them, datasets, reports, and dashboards are hidden somewhere. But what we get here, it's an asset of type Power BI dataset. We've got the hierarchy. For Power BI, well, again, it was the August 2021 release wave where we got new features added here. For example, that Power BI dataset is assigned to a shared Power BI capacity, so Pro license. That one is stored in that workspace, and additional properties like the description that is entered in the Power BI service. Some properties that are extracted, like it's in import mode, it's the URL, the fully qualified name. Plus, what is really new and really nice, what I really like, is a schema for your Power BI dataset. That is new, that came into appearance in August 21. So metadata, enhanced metadata scanning is available for Power BI datasets. And what is listed here? Well, we've got tables. We've got information about the data types here. And we've got the information, is it a date or is it a numeric field, or is it a measure? And if we get into the details for a measure that is defined in my Power BI dataset, there are properties, and there is one property which, well, says, hey, that's a measure. But what would be really nice, in my opinion, is to have the DAX formula added here, because as of today, it's only, well, that is a measure, but we don't know what is actually happening in there. The new functionality that came into the Power BI and Purview integration is based on the Power BI Scanner API that was released in summer this year, and Purview uses that enhanced metadata scanning to get all the information out of that. As far as I know, that scanning API also supports the extraction of formulas, of DAX formulas. So that one would be really, really nice. Lineage, well, lineage is not there for the measure itself. Lineage is, let's go to the related, let's go to the blog demos, let's go to the dataset. Lineage for Power BI is there at the level of the dataset. So no column level lineage at the moment. No more information about the lineage. If you've seen the Power BI lineage view in the Power BI service, Purview team, hurry up. There is some sort and some work to do for your part of the story. But as of today, there is metadata, there is schema information that is read out of Power BI and integrated into the Purview environment. What is missing? I'm nearing the end of my session, the business glossary. The classification is the technical definition. It's based on the data, it's based on rules, it's based on regular expressions. The business glossary, well, it's a way for you to structure your terms, how you name your customers, how you group your definitions. Like we've got a definition of a business partner, we've got customers, we've got suppliers, and we've got preferred suppliers. And that business glossary can be imported. If you already have it in another tool, you can import it using a CSV file. And going back to the data catalog, going back to the, no, not the SQL Server, search for the customer, go to a table. The business glossary terms can be applied on asset level. So edit that one. And we can add glossary terms like a customer table contains business partner information, contains customer information, and contains Kunden, which is the German word for customer. And we can also add Geschäftspartner, which is the business partner. Save that one. And in the list, we've got those glossary terms and everything is related. So if we go to the glossary term, what we see is, hey, we've got 3 assets in our data catalog that are associated with the business part. Few assets. Everything is related. And talking about everything is related, the data catalog itself, Purview itself, well, it's nice. It's a nice tool to get the overview about your data, to search for, to classify, to apply business terms. But what is really, really useful is the integration. Not only the integration to get metadata out of sources, but also the integration of having the Purview data catalog linked to, for example, your Synapse workspace. So if we move to the manage part of your Synapse workspace, there's the Azure Purview integration. And we can connect to a Purview account. And that Purview account can be used to search within your Synapse environment. There are 2 options. You can search in your workspace, Synapse, or let's look over the border and search in Purview. For example, search for customer data. What we get back is the list of assets. We go to a SQL table, and what is really nice in here, it's not only the data catalog information, but we can start to work with that table. We can create a linked service in Azure Synapse. We can create a new integration data set. Or we can create a new data flow. Going back to a file in the data lake, there is a way of analyzing the information that is stored in the customer's CSV file in a data lake using the serverless pool that is built into Azure Synapse Analytics. So very, very nice and handy integration in Synapse using Purview data. Another way, well, it's the integration of Data Factory and the Purview catalog. It looks the same, it feels the same. We are connecting the Purview catalog and we can have a look and we can search for customers, assets. We can create a new linked service. We can create a new data set and a new data flow. So that is the same. The other way around, the integration of pushing data out of Synapse and Data Factory into Purview to get lineage information. That one is also very nice. It only requires you to add the linkage to your data catalog. And if we have a look at the monitoring, the pipeline runs, and I've already triggered some pipeline runs, and there is one new column added here. It's the lineage status. And if we open that one, what we get is the information that the lineage status details is successfully or was successfully pushed into our Purview environment. So Purview not only gets the information out of Azure Data Factory, copy task, SQL Server integration services, it also gets the information out of Synapse pipelines. That one is new and came into Purview in August this year. So many updates in August this year. And well, Purview in action, the Purview Studio, is the one-stop shop for working with your data catalog. Purview, there are many integrations to other services. So the data governance with Azure Purview, if you get the question afterwards, is it possible? What can you do? Well, it's about you and your data. You want to know and learn about your data estate. You want to learn all those data islands. You want to catalog. You want to classify the data assets in your data environment. So a data catalog is the thing that Azure Purview provides you. Scanning and classification, it's automatically there. It scans the technical infrastructure, it adds classification, you can add your custom classification rules, and you can even apply your business glossary. And with the integration into Synapse Analytics, into Azure Data Factory, to work with Purview data and to push data into Purview, it really fits into the Azure data framework. And now it's your turn to start with Purview. And there is one really nice thing where you can start with Azure Purview. It's the Azure Purview Starter Kit. It includes a PowerShell script to create a Purview account, data lake storage, Azure Data Lake Azure Data Factory pipelines. They are run, and Lineage is added there. Beautiful tutorial. The link is on that slide. And with that, thank you for attending my session. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you will start walking the Azure Purview way. And thank you to Microsoft and all the sponsors and also the organizers in the background for really making this Data Platform Summit 2021 a huge success. And with that, don't forget to put in your name for the raffle to win prizes. And with that, thank you. And data governance is important. Start your data governance journey today with Azure Purview. Thank you and goodbye.